thrivers and what we can learn from them in the hope that they can pass forward to us. And I'd like them to introduce themselves with their name, where they live, how many years they survived, the type they have in their current stage, what treatments they had, just a quick list, and then what worked best for them. So why don't we go ahead and start? Kelly, you want to start us off?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Kelly Pounds. I live in Winter Garden, which is about 12 miles west of Orlando, Florida. I am 21 years out. The primary cancer that I had was in my right thigh. And I had some pretty heavy duty AIM, which is adriamycin ifosfamide mesna. Mesna is a buffer for the ifosfamide to help it protect the bladder. And so they call it AIM. I had that, and I had 3 rounds of full AIM. And then it took almost 8 weeks to schedule my surgery. So I had 1 extra round of ifosfamide mesna. And then I had massive surgery where they resected the lower femur and 3 of the 4 quadricep muscles. So I obviously had pretty massive, had to learn to walk again and the whole bit. So it took about, seriously, 6 months before I could feel like a normal person who could drive and get around by herself and things like that. But 18 months before it really stopped hurting. I remember the morning I stepped out of bed, put my foot on the floor, stood up and was walking toward the bathroom, and I went, oh, it doesn't hurt. So that was a big day, but I was about 18 months out. But worth it. Have not had any recurrences in those 21 and almost a half year now. So it was tough, but it was worth it.
Great, great. Thank you, Kelly. Laura?
I had a fibroid for 7 years. My gynecologist watched it, and we had an ultrasound every year. And then 1 year I just started bleeding heavily, and he's like, you got to get this thing out. I've never seen leiomyosarcoma, but my partners have. And I'm like, I'm too busy. And he convinced me. And I had a myomectomy because my 2 older children grew in my tummy and I didn't want to part with my uterus. And the first diagnosis was STUMP, smooth muscle tissue of uncertain malignant potential. I recurred 2 times in the first 2.5 years, both in where the uterus had been. And then I was diagnosed as low-grade LMS, and because I have a family history of severe arthritis, I shopped around for doctors a lot. You know, I went to gynecs, I went to the head of University of Maryland Medical Center. Then finally I saw the light after being on the ACOR list, which was an old list. And I found a sarcoma specialist at Washington Hospital Center in DC, and I was put on Faslodex, which is also a breast cancer drug. It's not an AI. It's just a shot once a month. Different side effects. I don't have the achiness, but it made me gain a lot of weight. But it worked, and I was NED for 13 years. I went off it for a couple of years, and I did recur in 2020. And it was a very, very low grade recurrence. And but because of where it was tricky to get to. So I went to Dr. Singer at MSK in New York City. I'm currently living on Long Island. And he then COVID hit right after I had a biopsy. So he put me off for 5 months. When I came back, I had a more aggressive second tumor that had infiltrated my lower part of the intestines and colon and bladder. So I have to pee all the time now. But 17 months later, I'm still Ned. I'm back on Faslodex. And I had my genomic testing done and found 4 drugs that are potential matches. They're PARP inhibitors.
Great,
I have faith in science.
great. And it sounds like what worked the best for you was the Faslodex.
Faslodex.
Faslodex. Okay,
Yeah.
sounds great. And you had stuff. So everybody, that's it can be a precursor. It's not always a precursor to LMS, but it's a slower growing tumor
Mhm.
that sometimes turns into LMS. Sandy, you're up.
Hi, I'm Sandy. My initial tumor was in the bladder, and that was 20 and a half years ago. At that time, I just had extensive surgery. They removed the bladder, pretty much everything else in the vicinity of the bladder. Because of the size of the tumor, it was already considered stage 4. And then I was good for about 2.5 years. And then they discovered mets in both my lungs. So that was more surgery. There's a total of 11 tumors, both lungs, all the nodules. So they resected each of those. And at that time I went on the AIM, like Kelly did, the adriamycin, ifosfamide, mesna protocol. And I have been NED ever since then. And I'm out of Ohio, USA. I think that was all the questions.
Yep.
Where do
I
you
think we hit it
where do you
all.
get treatment?
Oh, I started at a doctor in Akron, Ohio, and then after it metastasized to the lungs, I moved to Cleveland Clinic.
Okay, great, great. Thank you so much. We have 2 people who haven't made it. One is Leah Custer, and she couldn't be with us tonight, even though she wanted to be. And another one is
Caroline.
Abby, who is a 16-year survivor. I think Leah is a 16-year survivor too.
I messaged her, but I have not heard back.
Okay, well, she might
Sure.
pop in. She might pop in. So raise your hands, my panel, if you have had 1 chemo. Raise your hand. Yes, Kelly, you have had a chemo. Okay, raise your hand if you had 2 chemos. Oh, okay, Kelly, 3 chemos?
Well, I had adriamycin and ifosfamide at the same time.
Right, so you're counting those as 2 chemos. Okay,
Well, it is.
yeah, it is 2 chemos combined, yeah.
Not 2 different trials of it, but it is 2 chemos.
Anybody have 3? No. Okay, so 2 is the most we've had. And what's the longest each of you have been NED, which is no evidence of disease?
Mine's 21, a little more than 21 years. 'Cause,
21 years?
November of 2000 was my surgery after all the chemos.
Okay, and then NED since then?
Yes.
Laura,
13 years?
how many?
13.
13 years. Okay, I know Leah went 10 years. And I'm not sure about Caroline. Sandy,
I was 17 and a half years.
17 and a half. And I can say I went 17. I'm on 17 years without a tumor too after being stage 4. Do you all still get scans?
Yes.
How often?
Well, I'm every 4 months now because I had the surgery, but before that I was every year.
Okay, every year, yearly?
Mhm.
Initially, after the chemo and the surgery, I was every 3 months for 2 years, and then every 6 months for 5 years. And then at 5 years, I was yearly until 20 years out, when my doctors considered that the x-rays were more of a threat to the radiation from the x-rays was more of a threat than actually getting LMS. So they switched it to a chest x-ray every year, which initially was really scary. And I know in June, when I come up for my next one, it will be really scary again.
So
That's just how I roll.
you're not beyond scanxiety. Okay,
Nope.
even after all these years.
Even after all these years.
Okay, Sandy, how often do you get scans?
I'm at every other year now.
Every other year. Okay, great. I'm annual too, but I started Natera Signatera blood tests in between my yearly scans. What role did nutrition play in your treatment or survival? So I've got Sandy and Kelly down for that.
Well, initially, when I had my first med-oncology appointment, my med-oncologist, which, by the way, I went to Orlando Regional Hospital, which was a partner at the time with MD Anderson. So I had MD Anderson doctors where I was, and they also conferred with once a week with a medical panel via what was then, what we use now every day, like a Zoom sort of thing, which was a big deal 21 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I got the combined knowledge of 18 different specialists. So that was cool. So I already forgot the question. What was the question?
Nutrition.
Oh yeah, nutrition. So my doctor said, what's your diet? You know, it's an intake question. And I said, well, I'm a six months vegetarian. And before that, I had done a lot of Dr. Atkins. So I'd eaten a lot of meat and very kind of keto-ish. And he said, good, stay vegetarian. That we are finding that to be beneficial, not only for your nutrition, if you're going to be on chemo, but also for the fact that the extra proteins, extra animal proteins we're finding maybe not so good for you. So I kind of stuck with that for a while.
You're still a vegetarian.
I'm a vegetarian again, and I can tell you more about that, I think, later. But after my surgery, being a vegetarian, you can just eat so much beans and cheese till it really upsets your stomach, and pain pills I really, really needed. So my doctor said, pick a animal protein and eat that. So it was almost Thanksgiving. So I picked turkey, which made my mom so happy that I would actually eat her turkey at Thanksgiving. I ate that for about 16 years till I finally said, this is stupid. I need to get back to it. So for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been a vegetarian again.
Okay. Okay. Not the whole time, but most of it.
Yep.
Okay. Sandy, nutrition, what role did it play for you?
I was vegetarian before this all started, and I have been consistently ever since. But also when mine hit, I was in my, kind of early 20s. So the college years, I also did a lot of partying at that time, drinking way too much, no sleep, that kind of stuff. So that completely stopped. It was a big, big lifestyle change, especially having the bladder removed. And then I guess you'd consider them supplements, but I was taking like mushroom caplets and different algae. So kind of supplement, kind of nutrition.
Okay, great. Laura, how about you? Did nutrition play a part in your treatment?
I don't think so. I've been an ethical vegetarian for 35 years.
Oh, we got 3 vegetarians. Okay.
Ideally I would be a vegan. It's just hard because I don't cook. We raised our family as vegetarians. My daughter's a vegan.
Were you a vegetarian when you got diagnosed?
Oh yeah.
You are already a vegetarian.
Yeah, since I was 26.
Okay.
I was diagnosed at 44.
All right. since we don't have Caroline and Leah to pipe in here, I'll pipe in. I was eating okay when I was first diagnosed, but my diet over the years has gone down. That's all I have to say.
I will say this as far as nutrition, because I know there are often questions about, sugar and all that. And I will tell you that when I was in chemo and when I was recovering from the massive surgery that I had, I ate ice cream every day.
Every day.
About every day. And then about 3 months in, I ate ice cream twice a day. Because my whole thing was, if I'm going to die, I'm at least going to have dessert. So
They say have dessert first, right?
well, I wasn't that much of a pessimist, but but yeah. So I ate really, and that's honestly one of the reasons I couldn't go vegan. I just couldn't give up milk and eggs and cheese. I did at periods of time for weeks at a time, but yeah, not long term.
I mean,
Did
I'm
any-
trying to lose weight now.
Uh-huh.
But, I never gave up the junk food before January 1st of this year when I decided to lose weight.
Okay, so it's just recently. So did any of you do alternative treatments? And alternative meaning you didn't do the standard traditional ones, and instead you did something like the IVs with vitamin C or the Gerson diet or anything special like that? No. Okay. And then what about supplements? Sandy, you started talking about supplements that you took?
Yep, I sure did. Like I mentioned about the mushrooms, I was taking them dehydrated in capsules, the reishi, maitake, and cordyceps. And then the algae, I was eating a lot of spirulina. I think that's how you pronounce it. And being vegetarian, I already ate a lot of like fruit and vegetable anyway. But those were the main supplements I was taking.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think in our practice, I mentioned that I didn't have supplemental nutrition, but I did do some interesting exercise plan, which was exercise as hard as you could for a minute and then let your body come back to full resting heart rate, which initially took a long time, but you train your heart for heart rate variability. A good strong heart rate variability is or a low heart rate variability is has a comorbidity factor to it. So if you can increase your heart rate variability, meaning from your lowest heart rate to how high you can get it, the better you are there to get it up as quick as you can, the better. And it's interesting because long-term or like super athletes have a very, in most cases, have a very low heart rate variability depending on their sport. If you're a sprinter, not so much. If you're a long distance runner, your heart rate variability is much smaller. So what happens, and so many of them, we hear of like super athletes falling over dead of a heart attack, and that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But the science says that if you are exercising at your peak, and your peak is only 100 beats a minute, which some of these athletes, their resting heart rate is 45 or 50. So at 100, they're double or more their resting heart rate. When you stop initially, your heart drops below your resting heart rate. And when that happens, they would go into fibrillation and they would keel over dead. And that's what was happening. So the kind of exercise you do also matters. It's interesting to note too, that I was a 5 mile, I've never been a runner because I don't have the stamina, but I've been a 5 mile jogger before. And I did that every day. And I don't know, might be connected to the fact that the tumor was in my thigh, so which is my lead leg. So don't know, can't prove that, but it is an interesting phenomenon.
Okay. Laura, did you have anything like acupuncture or lots of exercise or CBD or anything?
No, I just take all my vitamins religiously.
Okay. I will speak to, I have not taken anything except calcium for my bones and magnesium, and I have taken some Kirkham over the years, but not religiously. Oh, Caroline's in the waiting room. Let me let her in.
Good. And I have taken vitamin D3 for years and years and
And
years.
D3, yeah, me
Yeah.
too. And
I
D3.
took off calcium, magnesium, and D3 for as long as I can remember, way before I got sick.
Yeah, I will speak to the exercise too. I don't know if it helped my NED status all these years, but it sure helped me cope. It really did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really did help me cope. And maybe that's related. I don't know. Caroline.
Hey, I'm
Caroline.
so sorry I got delayed. I had to go pick up my dog from the emergency vets.
Oh,
Oh
I hope
no,
he's
that
okay.
sounds like a sad story already.
Okay.
Is he okay?
Yeah, now we need
There
to know, is
she
he
is.
okay?
There he is.
There he is.
Oh,
Yay.
Okay. So Caroline, we just talked about supplemental and alternative things and nutrition. So I want to switch it over to another question. Have any of you gone against what your doctor suggested?
I did. I quit the AIM a good bit earlier than I was supposed to, but it hit me really, really hard. There was nothing that controlled my nausea. And also, it really messed with me mentally, like I was having blackouts. I would lose parts of my day. There was times, I remember one time I went and they told me not to drive, but I didn't think it was that bad and I drove anyway. And I went and got my prescriptions filled. And then a little while later, I was thinking that I need to go get my prescriptions. And when I was going to get my stuff, I realized that I already had them and I had no memory whatsoever of like running up to the pharmacy.
Wow.
So yeah, it was tough. And that was about the point I said, I'm done. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, that's an interesting question too, though. My doctor initially said 4 rounds of AIM. And then after 2 rounds, the tumor I had was in my leg and I could no longer feel the lump in my leg. So we did a scan. And so he said 3 rounds and then we're quitting. So he changed the initial plan. Yeah.
You didn't go against it. Okay.
No.
I went against my doctor's suggestion. When I was first diagnosed, I had a hysterectomy, and then he wanted to do adjuvant chemo, meaning I didn't have any tumor, but he wanted to do Gem-Tax, which was brand new at the time. And I said, no, thank you. And then the tumor board also recommended pelvic radiation, even though I didn't have a tumor. And I said, no way in hell. So I still
me
they
too.
haven't had any chemo or radiation. I'm not so against it now. I just haven't had it.
So it's interesting, after I had the chemo and it was successful, and then I had the I say it's successful because when they went in and did the surgery, the tumor had shrunk 98%. So there was only, it went from 5 centimeters to 2 millimeters.
So that was totally worth it.
Yeah, totally. But then the next thing was, on the original plan, was to do radiation. So when I went to speak with the radiation specialist again, who was part of MD Anderson and talking with the others, after the research, I said, we're pretty sure yours is gone. And so we're going to save any radiation for if it ever comes back somewhere. So they said after the odds are 50-50. If you have it, 50% of people have a recurrence and 50% don't. So he said, we're just not going to do it. And then we'll use it when we need it.
Okay, that's kind of my chemo strategy, is it's in my back pocket and I'll bring it out when I need it.
Right.
When I have a tumor or I can't do surgery.
And that's an interesting thing too, because 21 years ago, when I was in the throes of treatment, the plan were then that you have chemo to see if the chemo works. So before any surgery. So now the thing is, get it out. If you can get it out, get it out. Because mine was right at the 5 centimeter, right at stage 1. Any bigger than that, and it would have been stage 2. They said, we're going to do the chemo first. If we know the chemo works, then that changes the whole strategy of everything, because we'll figure that systemically it's killing everything. So that was the plan.
That makes sense.
My doctor wanted me to do radiation right after surgery, after the hysterectomy. And that was standard in 2004. And my husband had done some research and he found that it didn't change overall survival. So, I also learned that it could make future surgeries more difficult because the organs kind of melt together. So I turned that down. And then when I had my third recurrence many, many years later, and we found that my COVID tumor had grown after my COVID delay. Dr. Singer asked if I wanted chemo or surgery, and I said surgery, always surgery.
Always surgery first. Okay. Anybody have any regrets around their treatments?
I have a lot of regrets about how I spent 13 years thinking I was going to die the next day. And
Oh
so-
yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Yep. Everybody's got a head shake on that one. Okay,
Mhm.
that's a different topic though. Is there anything that you would do differently now?
Well,
Once
I
you were diagnosed? Mhm.
I was a dumb person when I was first diagnosed. In fact, I didn't know of the diagnosis for about 7 years because my doctor just decided not to tell me. And I was not smart enough then to know that I needed to get, anytime I have any operative procedure, that I needed to get a copy of the operation. I needed to get a copy of the pathology and anything else that goes along with it. And I've had a couple of minor little things done since then. And it's like, okay, I want to have that. I've got to have that, and it's the only blessing was that it gave me 7 years without worrying about cancer. But it was not a good situation.
No. And
No
you-
surveillance whatsoever.
You had stump as well. Is that?
Yes, I had stump,
It's just slow
and-
growing.
but it still grew. I mean, it was slow growing, very slow growing, but it did grow, and it did metastasize into about 36 tumors in my lungs, which when they showed up, the doctor says, well, where's the primary? We've got to find the primary. And I didn't know anything about an issue with a hysterectomy, and I didn't know, and they didn't know. So it's just like, it was a mystery until my surgeon that did the lung biopsy, he said, well, we've got to see those records from the hysterectomy. And that's when he found out. I said, you had stump. It was a very low mitotic index, but it changed.
Yeah. And it still became,
Stage 4.
it wasn't
So-
benign. Yeah.
That's a really good point too, that people get very upset. At least I shouldn't say people. I got very upset when I read the report that said high grade, fast growing, blah, blah, blah. That was very scary until my med-oncologist explained to me high grade, fast growing means that the chemo is going to work better on it, because chemo works to kill the quick growing cells in your body, like blood cells, your mucous membranes, all of the things that when you have chemo, you're worried about, and cancer cells. So the good news is about having a high rate or high grade tumor is that chemo is more likely to work. Doesn't mean it will, and of course you have to have the right one for your body, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It works on fast growing cells. the best. Yeah. So when you guys were first diagnosed, how did you cope with the anxiety and fear? Or did you?
Meditation, like 6-8 hours a day. Seriously, listening to
Okay.
meditation tapes, doing visualization. That was
Okay.
huge.
I did
Laura?
bunches of research, you know. I know they said don't go to the internet, but I did. And of course,
Me
I found
too.
ACOR, which was a predecessor, wonderful source of information. And it was really good to be able to connect with people. And then I was so glad that you know, I just devoured scientific studies. It was I guess it's very eye-opening.
What about you, Sandy?
All of the above. Of course, I spent a lot of time panicking. And then I did a lot of the research too. I needed to read everything, anything I could find on it. And I also did a lot of the meditation, breath work, learning to control, you know, the breathing, to control your heart rate, all that. And, you know, the guided imagery, that it helped. And I still use them to this day.
Mm-hmm. Laura, do you have anything to add to that?
I fell apart. My kids were 2, 9, and 11, and I was sure they would grow up without a mother.
Yeah.
My husband did everything. He did all the research, and he would read ACOR because I found it too devastating. But I did have a huge network of friends and colleagues in Maryland, and one of my neighbors worked for the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, and his specialty was soft tissue pathology. So he took all my samples, and he had his 11 colleagues read them, and they all said stump. And then he had me send them to various other pathologists that he knew, and one said benign. Everyone else said stump, and I just, you know, talked to everybody I knew. And, you know, I found one doctor who was my sister's boss's sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and it was also my internist's best friend. So, you know, I got hooked up to these people just through word of mouth.
Okay, so you
Helped a lot.
talked to a lot of doctors and pathologists and stuff and got all the information you could get. Okay.
I'm a
how
journalism major.
So I'd like to tell my LMS story from when I was first diagnosed. It took almost 3 weeks to get the diagnosis, which was a long 3 weeks. Fast forward 4 or 5 years, and they were doing studies on LMS tumors. And I went in to get a tumor sample to the lab at my hospitals to see if they still had the tumor samples, and they did. But I filled out the paper and I walked up and I gave it to the lab, and the lady said, "Are you Kelly Pounds?" And I said, "Yes." And she went, "What?" And then she said, "Hey guys, come over here. This is Kelly Pounds." And like, they all knew who I was, because nobody could believe, number one, that I was still alive 4 years later, maybe 5 years later. And number two, I asked them, how come it took so long? She said, because we sent it to us and 2 other labs, because we couldn't believe that it was LMS and it was in your leg. So.
Okay. All right. So how do you guys cope now? It's years and years later. How do you cope? Because we're still cancer patients. We're still survivors. So what do you guys do when you have that fear and anxiety come up?
I paint.
You paint. Oh, Kelly's got her paintings behind her.
Yep.
Yep.
And exercise.
And exercise. Okay. Sandy, what do you do?
Same as in the beginning. I do the meditations. That helps immensely. And I know it still, sometimes it gets to me too much. I had even left this group for a while because there was somebody that was like long-term and then had a recurrence after, you know, several years of being clean. And I can't remember the name offhand, but I like panicked and I left for a while. Then I was like, we're all individuals. It's going to be okay. I remember when I was first, you know, new to the whole experience, I was desperate for somebody, you know, to hear a story of hope. So I came back in so I could at least chime in once in a while and let people know that we're not a statistic. You know, we're all individuals. My chances of survival were about none, and I'm still here. So you just never know.
Okay.
So I still have those moments, but I
Yeah.
definitely, you know, you learn.
Laura, how do
Um,
you cope now with the fear and anxiety?
I really only get it when it's scanxiety time. I read as much as I can about different kinds of cancer research. And I also find it helpful to meet people in person. I've met everybody that I can on Long Island who has LMS.
Face to face,
Lots of people in Maryland.
pre-COVID, face to face.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
even after COVID,
Yeah.
that's helped me a lot. And the group.
Facebook group.
Yeah.
Okay. Caroline, how do you cope?
Well, I stay busy. I have all these projects around the house. I've got a wallpaper project coming up. I just finished resealing the grout in my mudroom and bath. And I play golf like 3 times a week when we have good weather, which is most of the time. And I get pet therapy from my dog. She and I take like 2 mile-and-a-half walks every day. So she's a joy to have, and volunteering at church and whatever. I've been in a couple of book clubs, so I'm basically in denial about having cancer.
Yeah.
That's not a bad place to be, really.
No.
At this stage.
I would say like Sandy for I don't know, after I was about 7 years out from diagnosis and 6.5 years in ED, I got out of ACOR. And only a few years ago, I had a friend who had not LMS, but a different, very rare cancer. And I was with her at MD Anderson, and the doctor there was talking with me. And in the course of the conversation, he said, you know, how do you know all these medical terms? I said, well, you know, blah, blah, blah. I told him a short story. And he said, are you still active in the community? Because you need to be, because a lot of people need to hear that. So then he guilted me in. And so then I found this group and I came back in.
And we're glad you did.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Let's see. I have more questions for you. What advice would you give caregivers? I don't know if we have any caregivers on here today. I hope we do. What advice would you give caregivers?
Find somebody that you can talk to about your fears.
You mean rather than the patient?
Besides the patient.
Yeah.
My husband was, he was a rock, I will say. It wasn't until about 3 or 4 years later that I was actually getting my haircut where he gets his haircut, which was an unusual thing. And she said, oh my gosh, do you know when you were under treatment, he would come in here and he would cry the whole time. And I was like,
Oh.
what? No, I did not know that, because he was not like that at all. And when I will say at 5 minutes to 11 every single night, I would break down. I mean, you could set your watch by me starting to cry. And it was just like, you know, I could just keep a smile up so long and be positive so long. And he would always just say, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And so caregivers, that's really that I can't tell you that you shouldn't be human. You've got feelings. So no guilt if you break down, totally no guilt, but it is really positive for the patient if you can then come back and say, I've done this research, or I've talked to this person, or I like my husband, who was not a researcher, not a science person, just says, pats my leg and said, "You're fine. You're doing fine."
Great. Have you guys had any surprises along the way?
Surprised I made it 21 years without a recurrence.
Right? Yeah, I get that.
I was really surprised when I recurred.
Mhm.
But I had been off the estrogen blocker for 4 years, so it was kind of in the back of my mind that it could. But, you know, my doctor said, maybe you never needed the estrogen blocker. And
Right.
I wanted to believe that.
How about you, Caroline? Any surprises?
Well, I guess the big surprise was finding out that I had it so long after I had it. But the other surprise was that I went to Dana-Farber, actually, most wonderfully on the advice of my oncologist here in Atlanta, the one that I saw one time. And he said that, you know, we just don't treat that here. You need to go someplace else, which was really magnificent of him. And he recommended MD Anderson or Dana-Farber or Duke University. And so my sister lived in Boston, so I went there. And here I am with a load of tumors in my lungs. And the doctor there says, and I've been doing some research, and I had a friend who was doing some research. So I asked him about letrozole, an aromatase inhibitor. And what I cannot believe is that he said, oh yeah, you can try that. Here's somebody's full of lungs. I guess, you know, I would have thought it'd been some sort of chemo or who knows what, but to just say, try it. But they were having a study. They were doing a study. I mean, I wasn't in the study or anything, but he always said that I was the poster child for letrozole.
Yeah.
So it was a surprise that worked.
Tell them the result of your letrozole.
Yeah, I mean, the almost immediately the tumor started either shrinking or hollowing out so that on CT scans, the ones that remain just look like empty bubbles. So it's just, and that's been durable for 10 years. And I just, after 10 years on letrozole, this year I've gone totally off of it, and I have my first scan in April, and I am going to have some scan anxiety, I think.
Yeah, but that's an amazing response that you got from the estrogen blocker.
It is, especially since I was not as high as what some people said. Well, you got to be 90% or higher for it to have an effect, and I was only 78% estrogen receptive. So
that's good to know. That's good to know. Do you guys have a book you would recommend?
I have one, and it's not particularly related to LMS, but it's one that kind of helped me put cancer in perspective. It's the Emperor of All Maladies by Siddhartha Mukherjee. And it goes to the history and future of cancer. And it has actually been made into a PBS documentary. So it's 6 hours of a documentary, three parts, put together by Ken Burns. So it also is very interesting.
Yeah, I would highly recommend that one. The book is a little hard to get through, but definitely the documentary. You know, in what ways have you guys changed because of LMS?
You definitely learn to not take things for granted, and definitely more compassionate to other people, because the whole you don't know what people are going through is so true. And like I said, I was fairly young when I was diagnosed, so I was also, you know, very immature. So I mean, it just like instantly it was time to grow up.
Yeah.
Right.
And don't sweat the small stuff. And you can't please everybody. Boy, you learn that really quick.
Laura, any lessons from LMS?
More empathy toward people. I was always an animal person and volunteered in animal shelters and got burned out on that. And then shortly after that, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I was in 2 support groups, and then a couple of us started the Maryland group, and then ACOR, and now LMSDR.
Great, which kind of segues into what I wanted to talk about is how do you guys pass the hope forward to other people?
Science.
Participating in the tissue studies and the thing with the blood work tests that's seems like it may have come from something we participated in.
Yeah, and you know, I try as I don't unlike some of the others, I don't read all the research constantly now because I can't handle it. You know, I know that it's there. I know where to go get it should I need it. And that's kind of that's kind of my frame of mind. But when I see somebody, especially on the LMS group on Facebook, that has something similar to me, I try to share the story.
Great, you reach out to them. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'm particularly interested in, because my situation is trying to make sure people are aware of the aromatase inhibitors and the potential. It certainly doesn't work for everybody, but it's a potential. And in my case, it was the first thing that was tried for me, and amazingly it worked.
Well, you know, just participating in this today, you are definitely passing hope forward. So I thank you all. If you could go back in time to when you were first diagnosed, what would you tell yourself?
Learn to ask for help.
Good
Amen.
one. Got to
Take all the help you can get.
Get all the help you can get.
Ask.
And it can come from very surprising sources too.
Like
Ask
what?
really
Caroline?
good questions.
What?
Ask really good questions. Always. Prepare yourself or prepare your doctor. Send him lists of questions in advance. Do your research.
Do your research. Okay. Sandy, what would you tell yourself?
I'm not sure. I don't know if anything would have, I don't know if there's anything that I could have told myself or anyone else could have told me that would have changed my emotional path, which, you know, was the, I always remember from like a psychology class, DABDA, the denial, the anger, the bargaining. I think you have to go through that. And sometimes, you know, if you need to sit there and cry for a couple hours, just let it go. Don't feel weird about it. Just release it and get on with it.
What's good about that is to know that what you're going through emotionally is normal.
Normal, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'd like to open it up to the audience. If you have questions for our panel or just want to discuss things, you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask your questions. And don't be shy.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you all. I mean, I am 18 years out for the first time and 15 years for the second. And people often come to me and say the kinds of things that you've been asking here, Sharon. And it's just so nice to listen to other survivors, because for me here in Santa Monica, as an LMS uterine survivor, it's been very lonely. So thank you very much.
How long ago, Anne, were you diagnosed?
18 and 15 with the second one.
So 18, do we add those together or 18
No, no,
years
no,
ago? for
I'm
the first one?
sorry, 18 years for the first one, 15 years for the second.
Got
So
it.
you had a recurrence at 3 years?
Yeah,
I see. Okay. Great. We should have had you on the panel, Ann. No, you wanted to listen. Okay.
listen.
Hi, this is Molly. I live in Central Ohio. I had a question for you, Kelly, about, you said yours was fast growing and that AIM seemed to work. I had a hysterectomy in November. There was a fibroid in February, but they didn't know. So it wasn't until I came out in November. And then in less than 2 months, another tumor grew like 8 centimeters, like super fast. My mitotic number's 50. And so anyway, I don't know the treatment. I got a surgery. They got it out, thank God. But I don't know what my sarcoma specialist is going to recommend, but I was interested in like how fast yours was growing and if AIM was specific for fast growing, or before Dr. I had seen had recommended Gemtax as adjuvant therapy because I did have a tumor spill, but I decided not to do it. But now it seems more likely that I will, given just how fast this grew. So I was just curious about that.
So in 2000, there weren't all these chemo options. AIM was the standard treatment for LMS. There were other treatments, but they had not been proven to show a lot of shrinkage. And quite frankly, my doctor was completely shocked that the tumor shrunk on mine. His hope was that it would hold it. And if they could see that it was holding it, they would know that it was working systemically. And then they would do the surgery. The surgery they had planned for me was much more extensive than the surgery I actually had to have because it had shrunk so much. So even though I had the distal femur removed and 3 of the 4 quadriceps, it was supposed to be all the quadriceps. They thought it was on the femoral artery in the right leg. They were going to take a vein from the left leg, turn it upside down, replace it. I was in great physical shape. They were going to take muscle from my stomach and rebuild a quad. I mean, it was, thank goodness, because I got to say, I could not have taken any more pain than I had. So I was very thankful. So now it looks like Anne wants to say something.
Yeah, that bell was inadvertent. Molly, I'm interested in what you just talked about because when I started, and Kelly was just referring to this, there were not a lot of therapies. It was guess at what to do with a uterine sarcoma. Mine also grew extraordinarily fast. I'm interested, they finally threw Gemtax at me because they were just fishing. But I'm interested in why, and it worked. I'm interested in understanding why you and somebody else earlier have been wanting to avoid that.
Avoid
There-
chemo?
No, avoid Gemtax as a
Oh.
combination.
Oh yeah, for me, I saw 5 doctors and 4 said there's no evidence that adjuvant chemo would make any difference. Why poison your body unless you get a recurrence, basically. And I thought, okay. And I also thought they're going to do this second look surgery, which was less than 2 months from the first one, or about 2 months after the first one. And I was like, if they find something, we can just do chemo then rather than. And in hindsight, I don't know if it would have made a huge difference. This tumor grew super fast. Even by the time I started chemo, it probably would have already been going. But I think it's because in first diagnosis, there isn't any evidence that adjuvant chemo makes any difference for recurrence, prognosis, overall survival. So it's like, why do that unless you see, and then we learned. Though the one doctor I saw who recommended chemo said, you're at very high risk. You have an aggressive tumor. That's how he read it. The other doctors were like, you have a 50-50 chance. And this guy was like, he read it more accurately, honestly, like how aggressive mine was. And I don't know if mine was a local recurrence from the spill or metastatic. They don't really know yet. But yeah, I think it's just because they didn't have evidence that adjuvant therapy works to only do the chemo if you have a sign of disease.
Yeah,
that's
and
active.
that's frankly why my doctors had me do the chemo first. So they could have something to measure to see if it was working.
Interesting. One of your question, Molly, was if Gym-Tax or AIM works better on fast-growing cells. I would say if it works for you, they're equal because they're both cytotoxic traditional chemos that work on fast-growing cells. So they're equal in that way versus some of the targeted therapies that are out there. So anybody else have questions?
Hi, it's Kathleen. Thank you all for presenting your stories today. I'm a 5-year survivor, and some of you mentioned this a little bit, but I kind of like to hear from everyone. Like, at what point do you stop thinking about this every day?
Good question.
Yeah, not sure that's, well, maybe not every day do I think about it, but it's always there. I don't dwell on it every day. I certainly used to. I will say that when I checked in for my first chemo, I had to wait for a room because they were cleaning the rooms. And the person who was coming out of that room, interestingly enough, was also an LMS patient. She had had it in the uterus, and she had been cancer-free for 13 years, and it recurred. And she said, she's the one that said to me, don't ever stop scans. She said, I stopped at 10 years and hers had come back, and her prognosis was not very good at that point. Let's just put it that way. So for 3 years, she hadn't had scans.
Yeah, because they couldn't catch it early enough.
Right.
It took a lot of good scans before I stopped obsessing on this. I thought about my cancer the minute I woke up and the minute I went to sleep. So it took years and years and years of finally getting good scans, and then I couldn't believe it for the longest time. I still felt like the shoe was going to drop, and I still hold reservations that this may come back. So, but I don't think of it every day. I certainly don't worry about it every day. Laura, how about you? Well, you're still fresh. You just had a recurrence.
Yeah, I don't think I worry about it though, because I feel like I was lucky to match on some drugs so that there are options for me if it recurs. And I'm on something that I know worked before in preventing a recurrence.
Okay.
I don't think this is gonna be the thing that does me in.
That's good news.
I think that it'll be something else, you know,
All right.
heart, from the weight that I gained from the estrogen blocker.
Yeah,
So
you know,
I'm hoping it's many, many, many years from now. Anyhow.
my orthopedic surgeon literally said to me, and this was right after diagnosis, so not after treatment, not all that kind of stuff. But he literally said to me after he told me what I had and blah, 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 he said, unless you get hit by a Mack truck, eventually this cancer will kill you. Well, that was not a very good worm to plant in my head.
No.
So I was really diligent. The good news is when MD Anderson moved out of Orlando Regional, a couple of the doctors who were really sarcoma specialists moved too. And the ones that I had there, the doctors there would not give me scans after 10 years, but my med oncologist would. So that's where I go to get my scripts for scans now.
Okay, great.
I mean, my orthopedic oncologist would, my med oncologist would not. Yeah.
How about Caroline and Sandy? How long did it take till you didn't worry about this as much?
I guess it was really, you know, maybe a couple of years. I mean, first of all, first off, I wouldn't go buy any new clothes, wouldn't buy anything new. Got my will updated. But then after I saw this working, and I never, I mean, I had the thoracotomy for the lung biopsy, but it was, so I've experienced a little bit of pain, but otherwise I've never had a single symptom. So nothing visible except what I see on CT scans, which of course I always get I get a disc and I look at them at home every time, even now. But I don't think about it. I just have other things that I worry about. I've had breast cancer since then, stage 0, whatever it is, carcinoma in situ, whatever, DCIS, and lumpectomy and radiation. But that's 3 years past, and I'm beyond that. And for 5 years, I've had a real crap disease that has bothered me tremendously. Meniere's disease, inner ear disease, which is a real crap disease. You just don't want to have that. Please, I hope you don't ever. But so I've just not really thought about it. I don't think about it until I get close to scans. Oh, it was time for a scan. Okay.
Yeah, one of the questions that came up when we were doing the practice was, you know, this sort of thing, and I said then, because it had just happened, I had walked through a door and I turned around to talk to my husband. When I did, I whacked the back of my hand on the side of the door jamb, and I said to my husband, "Remind me tomorrow when I have a lump here that I hit my arm on the door, not that I have cancer."
Yeah.
So it's
every
always
new
there.
bump
You
and
feel
lump,
a lump, a bump, it's right there. It's immediate.
Okay, Sandy?
Yeah, it took a lot of years for me too. It's not really like that now anymore. Although I will have episodes if I realize I'm not taking care of myself the way I should. Like if I'm working a lot of hours for several weeks and I'm starting to feel run down, and you know, I start getting panicky. I'm like, this is the exact opposite of what you need to be doing. You got to take care of yourself. So then I'll start getting panicky about that. And or like if I have a cold that holds on for too long, all of a sudden I get like a little panicky. But for the most part, it's just kind of in the back of my head. And, you know, I think about it, but I don't worry about it nearly as much. But I would say a good 10 years that it was like Sharon said, as soon as I woke up, I was thinking about it. Last thing before I went to bed, I was thinking about it. So it takes a really, really long time.
Thank you all. Does that answer your question, Kathleen? Where's Kathleen?
Yes, thank you so much. That was helpful. So I think I've got a little while to go because I've just spent 2 years in an ED.
Yeah, if you're worrying every day, you're normal.
Okay, good. Because my family's tired of hearing about it. But I'm like, this is my life. So
Yes, right? It's the focus of your life.
It truly is. So okay, it sounds like I'm normal then. This anxiety,
You're normal.
It gets worse. It's getting worse. So I need to work on that. But thank you all very much for sharing your journeys.
You know, I want to mention something about anxiety. I used to have it, of course, and I still do to a certain extent, but I can actually fall asleep in the scanner.
Oh, I love that part.
I did some self-visualization, and I mean, it's the same thing as hypnotism, but you just really imagine yourself as relaxed as possible and tell yourself to relax. And I've gotten so conditioned to doing that in the scanner that I get drowsy. I get like so relaxed. I don't want to get out. I'm like, I feel so relaxed. So one thing I recommend is self-hypnotism or hypnotism. A good hypnotherapy therapist will teach you how to do it. Yeah.
Along that line, when you ask about books and that kind of thing, that was one that I became obsessed with. Dr. Andrew Weil. He does
Oh.
integrative medicine out of Arizona, and he's got some really good self-hypnosis programs that are not expensive. And I did those things obsessively. And like I said, those are ones I still do to this day. It helps me so much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's something everybody can use.
For
Any-
anything.
Right.
Exactly. For life.
Any other questions? Judith. Hello, Judith.
Hi there. Thank you all for sharing your stories. It's so encouraging. I'm just 18 months from my diagnosis, and I had a very large tumor in my abdomen, which they were reluctant to remove because they didn't want to take me off of chemo because of the spread to my liver and lungs. So they finally took the tumor out last April successfully. And I have this about 12 spots in my lungs and about 12 spots in my liver, but they're all very small. So now they have me on Yolandis. And I also see an integrative oncologist who has me on a lot of supplements, mushrooms, various kinds of things. And it's very hard to judge which is, it's not growing, I'm pretty stable, but it's very hard to judge which is helping me.
And it might be the interaction of the two. You don't know.
Yeah, right. So I want to eliminate
essential oils.
And I want to eliminate the chemo because this is my husband, Mark. He does a lot of essential oil work with me. I want to eliminate the chemo because it's so hard. I'm on a 4-week cycle. The first 2 weeks are horrible. The last 3rd week is bad. The 4th week is great. When I'm not on the chemo, I feel fantastic. So one of my questions is, when do you know when to quit the chemo? Because has such a negative effect on the quality of your life.
I would say if it shrinks, then you know the chemo's working.
It's not shrinking, it's just stable.
So I would be reluctant to quit. That's just me personally, not a doctor, don't have any medical, but emotionally, I could not. It was hard for me. And I got to tell you, AIM was, it was no walk in the park. It was tough therapy. You're talking about what, for 3 weeks, mine was 3 weeks apart. And on day 20, I finally started feeling like a person again. Up until then, I was pretty much in bed. And then they hit me again. After the second round, when I no longer felt the lump, they had to extend it because my blood counts were too long. So I didn't have it until 4 weeks. So even then I was sweating, oh my gosh, maybe it's going to grow back, blah, blah, blah. And then the scan reports came back that said it had shrunk so much. And when that happened, is when the doctor said, we're going to do one more round, not 4. We're only going to do 3. So emotionally for me, knowing that the chemo was working allowed me to sleep at night. So if it's working and your doctor recommends that you keep going, personally, I would keep going.
Thank you.
That's not you.
I'd like to address which one is working. I have seen people, 20 years now, I've watched people who use mushrooms and supplements and stuff, and I've never seen it work on its own. I've seen it help them stay healthy, but I've never seen supplements stop cancer or delay it at all. So I would say odds are it's that chemo that's keeping you stable, but it's really your body. If you want to take a break from it, or try a different one, it's definitely up for discussion with your doctor. Any other questions? Yeah, thanks, Judith. No? Are we getting tired? You guys on the East Coast, what time is it?
8:14.
Oh, it's time. It's time. I should let you go. And now I could catch up with Kelly and have a glass of wine.
There you go. You're past due.
Okay.
This is Anne from Connecticut. I just want to thank all of you for doing this. It's really very helpful. So thank you.
Welcome.
I
welcome.
agree. You guys rock.
It's extremely helpful. I thank Sharon so much. I am faster to be on aromatase. It was once I talked to Sharon, everything sped up. So I hope we can do this again. It's, I don't want to start crying, but it's invaluable to hear from you guys.
I believe you, because when I was first diagnosed, I mean, I first didn't have anybody. And then when I found the ACOR list, which was the only game in town with other LMS patients, it was like a lifeline had been sent to me, even though everybody was a little different in their treatments and what was going on with them, I felt connected. And I think that's an important lesson for us all to remember, to try to stay connected. And I know the Facebook group isn't for everybody. I mean, it's got its ups and downs, and sometimes it's nice to just give yourself a break and not think about cancer. But at least stay with the newsletter so you can stay informed of any big developments that happen or any new treatments, and stay connected in some way. I think it's really important. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you want to say something?
Oh, I was going to say something along the lines of staying connected, and back to like things that surprised me along the way. I went through, and I know I see a lot of other people in the group go through the same thing. People that I considered really close to me absolutely could not handle the disease and completely disappeared. But then on the same note, there was people that I wasn't very close to or didn't know very well, and they kind of come out of the woodwork and were incredible support. So just like kind of letting people know what's going on, you'll be surprised, who cares.
Yeah.
Right. And who steps up?
Who steps up? Yeah.
Yeah, who steps up? Well, any last words, you guys? I'll just say hang in there. Hang in there, because the one thing I learned is you just never know. I was sure I was dead meat. I tried to convince all my friends and family that I wasn't going to live past 2 years. Nobody does. And look at me now with egg on my face, right? So you just really never know. So hang in there, stay informed, do your homework, and stay connected. All right. Well, thank you.
Know that we love you.
Thank you so much. I love you guys too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.